program, and utilize technologies, and how we may want to change this also in the future. And this aligns, of course, very much with the core aims that we have at the European Platform for Digital Humanism. So with the European platform, we take part in a global discussion that is led by many initiatives and institutions that all call for a critical re-evaluation of the processes of digital transformation that we ourselves have put into motion, and in many ways that are at the moment outpacing us and our understanding of what the deeper impact will be that they have on us. So we tackle these challenging topics together with a network of European partners and international partners. And in line with our core mission at Ars Electronica, this is of course very much driven by artistic practice and by artists themselves. So today we are actually focusing on artists and projects on the European Platform for Digital Humanism that explore how to build narratives and stories around huge challenges such as the environmental, climate and biodiversity crisis. And artists that really make these issues tangible for visitors and the audiences of their works. But also artists and creative producers who develop actual prototypes and first ideas for solutions tackling some of these issues. A number of our European projects are actually specifically dedicated to exploring these topics. And we'll take a closer look today at 3 of them: the Starts Prize, Roots and Seeds, and Studiotopia, as well as some of the artists involved there. We are also very, very happy that today we will have a chat with artist Kat Austin at the end of this session, who is currently participating in the Studiotopia program that we'll hear about also today. And of course, with all of these projects, a main driver is really collaborations between arts and science. And we'll explore this now at the beginning of the session through the lens of the Starts Prize.
Absolutely. Before we start with the Starts Prize, let me open a bit also the context of where we're in today. As Christina already said, climate change and also environmental degradation is, of course, an existential threat to Europe and to our whole world. To work on these specific challenges, we really need new strategies, new growth strategies, new innovative, but also really resource intensive and resource efficient strategies. Today we will discuss many of such projects, ideas, solutions, all driven by having one thing in common, by actually collaborative practices between artists, scientists and citizens. One way we see represented in many of these projects is also proposing alternative models of production in a way of new materials, material research, innovative materials, but also new forms of manufacturing itself. In more and more cases, we also see holistic systems of new economical models, which are proposed, also very much manifested in circular economy movements. Of course, we see also many, many projects which actually claim our responsibility in the whole thing. So what can individuals do? What can the society do to prevent climate change, but also to reimagine a better and more meaningful collaboration and also coexistence with our nature? And we see many projects also representing the focus on the importance of digitalization for the benefit of environments, and also, of course, for using computer-controlled systems. Artificial intelligence, for example, can be used to save water or to stop species loss. But at the same time, we really need to consider all the responsibilities aligned with that, raising questions on how such systems can protect or can we protect from unauthorized access, and also, very honestly, the need for an increased evaluation, also awareness on the environmental footprint of digital technologies. So absolutely, we are navigating here in, I would say, a tension field. We have as many opinions as solutions here, but most of us agree really on one thing, that there is a huge need for action. And action is also what is called for when it comes to the program of the European Commission, in particular with the massive investments linked to the European Green Deal. I actually looked into the concrete agenda of the European Green Deal, and I wanted to remind us today what their action plan is. So they're investing in environmentally friendly technologies, supporting industry to innovate, rolling out cleaner, cheaper, and healthier forms of private and public transport, decarbonizing the energy sector, ensuring buildings are more energy efficient, also working with international partners to improve global environmental standards, and last but not least, really proposing also a European climate law that turning all these political commitments also in legal obligations. Many, of course, doubt that this alone will be sufficient. In this context, many also really call for a collective way of addressing it, addressing also a sustainable and inclusive future. And here we have a brand new initiative from the European Union, the new European Bauhaus, which is bridging this European Green Deal also with very collaborative and co-creation processes. Ars Electronica is an official part in this movement, and together we really try to mobilize also artists, architects, activists, designers, everybody pretty much creative minds who wants to participate in this whole discussion, also how to reimagine a sustainable future with a focus, with a clear focus also on sustainable and affordable and accessible living spaces. One initiative which is bridging this cross between art and science in particular is STARTS. The initiative you probably as Electronica familiar person know already very much, focusing on the nexus between arts, science and technology. Europe has historically a very strong focus on engineering in research and development. However, today we really know that this is not sufficient. So technology needs approaches which are responsible and also sustainable. In this context, expertise and also practice of artists can directly drive and influence also ecological, responsible transformation of new technologies. And in this recognition, the European Commission, as you know, initiated the STARTS initiative, and we are honoring each year the most forward-looking examples, also ones which actually highlight how innovation can be driven in a sustainable way. In fact, perhaps actually the most dominant and most focused topic within the last years, also within all the submissions to the STARTS Prize, was the topic of circular economy and also using resources in a sustainable manner. Many of the submitted projects and actually many of the grant prizes from the various last years deal with climate change and also environmental sustainability as the most pressing issues, and they really propose solutions. They really try to deal with really tangible ways of ideas and projects. They respond also to an increased global movement of citizens demanding concrete actions from governments, from industries, from our society in general to really stop global warming before it is too late. One of the absolute fantastic examples we've seen in the last years is the Grand Prize winner of Innovative Collaboration from 2020 from Olga Kiseleva, the project called Eden. Together with really an extensive number of collaborators from all over the world, she succeeded in bringing a species of elm tree back into existence in Europe. The project leveraged sensor and telecommunication network technologies to investigate how trees interact with each other and also their environment. They developed a technique to connect the trees across the globe and also across the different locations to be able to communicate to each other and maybe even learn from each other. All this data, all these processes were actually made audible and visible in some exhibitions, and I would suggest to look into the video.
Represents an artistic utopia assuming that extinction, despite its supposedly definitive and irreversible characteristics, can be revoked thanks to the advancement of contemporary human civilization. Eden starts in 2013 after the restoration of the elm of Biscarrosse, a tree located in the center of the French town of Biscarrosse that died a victim of the Dutch elm disease, a pathology responsible for the disappearance of most elm trees in the French landscape. After this happened, we were invited to create a monument to commemorate the elm that held a very important place within the town's identity because of its long history of more than 600 years. When we started the preliminary works for the realization of this commission, we contacted the elm specialists of the INRA, the Institut National de la Recherche Agronomique, and by exchanging a dialogue with them, we developed a project that articulated scientific research and artistic creation. Working closely with the team of researchers, we were able to mix the genes of the elm of Biscarrosse with genes of the Siberian elm to create a new variety of elm resistant to the Dutch elm disease. We then planted them in the same place the old tree was, articulating it with an aluminum sculpture, creating a monument using biotechnology as a means for artistic creation. Ever since the restoration of this particular elm, we have been working together with the INRA to restore the elm forests, which are now close to disappearing from Southern Europe. Our project became well known, and our interdisciplinary team received invitations from different parts of the world to work on different species of trees. Thanks to these numerous commissions, with the team of researchers, we developed a series of sensors and captors that allow us to perceive and to understand the communications the trees exchange with their environment in the form of molecular emissions, electric or sound signals. Then we worked with Orange Telecom and with the Institute of Applied Ecology to create an adapted network to vehicle what the trees communicate. Thanks to this technology.
While Eden focuses very strongly on the coexistence, maybe even the collaboration between humans and nature, the second grand prize winner of 2020 for artistic exploration actually proposes innovative measures through biotechnologies. Designed by Decay, Decay by Design by artist Andrea Ling is a series of artifacts that show actually the processes designing decay. It built through a residency, the 2019 Ginkgo Bioworks Creative Residencies, on how to design a world without waste. And the artist actually created biological artifacts to illustrate also and prove the possibility of a paradigm shift in the production of goods. In her work, she also exemplifies and showcases that only by integrating these biological systems into the design process itself, we can actually achieve sustained renewal. Let's also look into the video.
Design by Decay, Decay by Design is a project that responds to the questions on how to design a world without waste, and how biotechnology might play a role in that. My response is to recognize that as an architect and designer, all I do is design waste, or what will be waste. And if that's the case, then I should try to design waste that I can live with, in-site and on-site. I wanted to design waste as nature does, as inputs for future organization rather than only as the result of breakdown. Decay is a design opportunity, allowing us to relink production and consumption with the disposal of material objects. With the assistance of Ginkgo scientists, this project explores how to organize decay, using enzymes, fungus, bacteria, and other biological agents as ways of composing and decomposing matter at the same time.
It was taking a step back and asking really, really interesting questions around that bigger question of how biology, how waste exists in biology, or how decay is part of biology, and how decay and renewal work together.
My base material system included biocomposites of chitin, cellulose, and pectin, derived from the exoskeletons of shrimp, tree pulp waste, and fruit skins. These materials can be combined in different ratios to form different bioplastics that are environmentally responsive. I combine enzymes derived from fungus, bacteria, and human saliva into the bioplastics, using the enzymes to transform the material rather than simply destroy it. This was degradation as a fabrication process, and was done with the guidance of Dr. Josh Dunn.
I think one thing that's really interesting when you think about laboratory work in particular is it produces an incredible amount of waste, particularly plastic waste. And this is something that is a really like a pretty strong disconnect among scientists, because many scientists are very minded towards sustainability. This is something that actually we have potential to make a big difference with at Ginkgo, given that we're built around biomanufacturing, which has natural intersections with notions of the circular economy. But to get there, we spend a lot of plastic.
With Kyle Kenyon, I was able to test different strains of Streptomyces on my biocomposites. Streptomyces is a common soil bacteria and secondary decomposer, which produces vibrant pigments in jasmine, the compound responsible for soil smell. Finally, with Dr. Mingyao Wu, a fungal engineer, I used Aspergillus niger, a black mold, and Trichoderma viride, a green mold, in fungal co-cultures to transform different materials and objects. This included degrading patterns into bioplastics and coloring wood carvings designed with increased surface area for maximum colonization. My goal in using these material systems and these biological agents was not to make a low carbon footprint object or upcycle waste. Rather, it's to support a different mode of design, where the process of making and breaking is provisional and not just consumptive, and to redistribute value away from permanent materials that destroy ecosystems onto transient ones that restore them.
Much like the STARTS initiative and the artists involved in STARTS that we just saw now, the European project Roots and Seeds, Biodiversity Crisis and Plant Resistance tackles a big challenge of our time, and that is the biodiversity of the vegetal world. Roots and Seeds is led by co-artists in Barcelona and brings together Leonardo Olatz, Ars Electronica, and the University of Barcelona together in a project focused very much on building a network of artists, curators, scientists, and creatives that are all really dedicated to exploring how to foster habits that take better care of our environment, with a specific focus, of course, on plant life. In fact, Roots and Seeds is supporting the production of 2 artworks over the coming year, as well as a residency with Leonardo Olatz in Paris. So the artist Marit Mikleb has been invited as a resident with Roots and Seeds, and her research will really align with a broader research project that takes her to Chile, where she will work with the Valley of the Possible, Refugio of Art and Research in the Chilean Andes, on a piece that explores alternative perspectives on our relationship with the natural world. Another of the pieces produced within Roots and Seeds will come from Post-Human Studies Lab, a collective that will explore the former Soviet Union's relationship with the vegetal world in an installation they will be producing. And artist Laura Sinti has as well been awarded with a production grant that will focus on exploring plants that have recently become extinct and are now unable to survive in their natural habitats and can only stick around in controlled environments now. All 3 of these artworks will actually be on view at the 2022 edition of the Ars Electronica Festival. Roots and Seeds will also launch a podcast series this year, so I encourage you to keep an eye out for this project and to listen along when the podcasts go online later in 2021.
Well, what we see in Roots and Seeds and also in so many other projects actually at Ars Electronica is that sustainability is, of course, an increasingly dominating narrative in the 21st century. The Sustainable Development Goals, short SDGs, defined by the United Nations, build, of course, a very strong thematic framework for this. In many cases, all the scientific proof is absolutely there. So we know, of course, since many, many years that there is a huge warning about the impact of climate change. But the behavioral change is really lagging behind. Global issues sometimes remain remote and also a bit abstract. So Ars Electronica is working quite extensively also within these areas, of course, to communicate and also to trigger the interest on the importance of sustainable development in order to change the way we think, but also the way we act altogether. Exactly this is also done by our project Studiotopia, which is a Creative Europe funded project. together with our partner network from Beaux-Arts and Cluj in Brussels, for example, Cluj Cultural Center, Lasnia Center of Contemporary Arts, Onassis Stegi in Athens, the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and Laboral in Gijón, we are really trying to promote collaborative practices between artists and scientists, but also between cultural and research organizations, between academics and creative industries, and of course also innovation centers to look out for really responsible innovation. Let's look into the project trailer from our dear partner Beaux-Arts in Brussels.
Yeah, maybe we can listen to you without mask.
Alors, est-ce que ça marche?
This is what the digital people also will do. We bring them to a virtual garden.
And inside these organs, the bacteria find the perfect environment. And so that's what we here try to do, to see how we can get molecules from this side, so from the blood side, into the black, and that's the brain ventricles. As I told you already, we both use our creativity.
Yeah. The core value of scientific research for me is actually really similar with artistic practice.
And I would like to if it's possible, to take measure the vibration of the cell. You know?
No, explain.
The absolute core of Studiotopia is the current running residency program. So we paired 13 artists with 13 scientists, and it's a bit of a reverse residency model because the artists are actually inviting the scientists over to their studio for collaborative practices and also for, of course, producing artworks, but also material research, for academic research, for new ways of developing also concepts and educational programs in the field of sustainable development. All of them are connected to one specific sustainable development goal. And we are really thrilled to have one artist here today with us in a round who is currently doing a residency in the frame of Studiotopia.
Indeed, we are very happy to have Kat Ost with us today. Welcome, Kat.
Hi, hello, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So before we jump into our chat, let me give you a very short introduction to Kat's bio. Kat Osten is based in Berlin. Her artistic practice focuses on environmental issues. She melds disciplines and media, creates sculptural and new media installation, performances, and participatory artworks. Her practice is underpinned by extensive research and theory and driven by a motivation to explore how to move towards a more socially and environmentally just future. So we are really very happy to welcome you today, where we are focusing on the human impact on our environment and some of the big challenges that we have just spoken about in the past 20 minutes or so. And we are, of course, extremely interested also to explore how artists are really tackling these topics in their work. So I was wondering how you relate to these challenges, these kind of big global environmental issues in your own artistic practice.
Thanks. Yes, well, I suppose the main motivation for me has always been how can we live better with the environment, and what do we need to know, and how do we need to know it in order to do that? And so I've been working on problems to do with what Timothy Morton refers to as hyper-objects for many years. So the climate crisis, fossil fuel legacies, and pervasive pollution. And the modes that I try to explore with my work are predominantly kind of understanding how these relationships that we have with the environment are mediated by our own experience and through technologies, increasingly through technologies in different ways. So I've been looking at how we can experience more embodied and more emotional connection to things that are otherwise kind of outside of our experience. So the climate crisis, I mean, when I started working on the climate crisis as a topic, it was far less tangible than it is today, but it's still something that happens outside of our general sphere of experience. And so the works that I make try to interrogate this this hyperobject and understand how we can relate to that in an emotional and engaged way, how we can relate to the land and other non-human, more than human agents in a way that's more sympathetic and in a way that somehow gives a hint to the complexity of our overall experience and our agency on the world.
What we see in your artistic practice, and I think what we all agree on, is that in order to tackle all these really big environmental challenges, collaborative practice are needed. Practices were involving artists and scientists, practices really beyond the scope of sole research processes. What is, of course, also a very big focus in Studiotopia. Maybe you could explain a bit also what you're currently working on in Studiotopia.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's wonderful to be part of the Studiotopia program actually, because it's really great to have this reversal. So I've often been embedded in institutions where I'm the artist going in and sort of absorbing understanding and trying to reformulate that into a different kind of knowledge. And in the Studiotopia program, I'm working with two scientists, so Indrej Lobate from the University of Helsinki and Lawrence Gill from Trinity College Dublin, who have very different experience and backgrounds. So Indrej she leads a group looking at data science and evolution. She uses machine learning to understand changes in the prehistoric past, looking at how that's affected evolutionary changes. And Lawrence looks at sort of passive remediation and environmental engineering in relation to the movement of pollutants through water and through the air. And so it's really fascinating having them coming and working as part of the studio. And we've been really, what we wanted to do was to understand how our multiple different perspectives could come together to create questions that we may not have come up with on our own, and hopefully create knowledge that wouldn't have happened if we were not collaborating. And this is something that's very important to me, because I really believe that by synthesizing the experience of multiple people, so working in a collaborative way, and by synthesizing perspectives from multiple disciplines, it's the only way to kind of work out how we can find better ways to be with the environment and other stakeholders in the environment. And with Lawrence and Indrej, the topic that we've decided to explore more and explore through artistic and scientific experimentation is the perspective of plastic in the very long term. So again, relating with one of these hyper objects, looking at how plastic exists in the very long time span outside of human experience, and trying to understand what that means to us as plastic as an entity in the environment, which is, ubiquitous and irrevocably released now. So we're coming together to kind of work on that and to share experiences, carrying out experiments, going and exploring the environment containing plastic, trying to really feel what that might mean in the context of our research questions.
So We had a chat last week to prepare a little bit for today's session, and what struck me there really was that your commitment to collaboration or to participative engagement doesn't extend only to your collaboration partners or scientific collaborators, but also to the environment you find yourself in. So I would be very interested, and I think also everybody who's watching at home, to hear a bit about how you think about this participation with the locations and the landscape that you find yourself in.
I would say, yeah, so I suppose the simplest way to say it would be to say that I consider many, many entities to be stakeholders in our environment. And I try to understand how I can relate to that through my own physical affordances as a human person. And so when I try to address a topic, and you know, maybe I gave some sense of that when I was just talking about our experiments with, in terms of plastic as an entity in the environment, I try to allow myself to consider the perspectives of all of the different stakeholders. So that means kind of embedding myself into a landscape, or really forming some form of relationship with the other entities with which I'm working. So, you know, in the case of projects like The Matter of the Soul, which was a symphony that I wrote about the Arctic and the changing experiences in the Arctic relating to the climate crisis, I had as stakeholders in mind not only the people living in the Arctic, but also the water of the Arctic and its changing identity as the ice melts and the water is then, you know, free to go and travel around the world. Similarly, I was working last year on a project called Stranger to the Trees, which was looking at birch trees and how birch trees might coexist with microplastics. And while I was working with these trees and carrying out experiments with them, I also wanted to kind of get to know them a bit better. And so as they were experiencing something very new, I wanted also to experience something new that would change myself. And so I started learning the Renaissance piccolo with them, so playing to them as I sort of cared for them and worked with them, so that we could share this experience of something new happening, a new element being introduced to our lives, so that that would give me a kind of deeper understanding of what was happening to them, even though it was not the same experience.
When you say sharing experiments, of course, also audiences are a very, very important stakeholder group, and in particular in such quite complex and also big, intensive research projects and artistic projects like yours, it is sometimes a bit difficult to make people really understand and also grasp the whole complexity of such projects. How do you actually involve audiences? How to also engage them and empower them, maybe even to use the tools you're suggesting?
Well, so I suppose there's two ways that I aim to do that. And one is through the production of the artworks. And at the forefront of the production of the artworks is that there is an aesthetic and experiential communication from the artwork of the essence of what I've learned through the research, so that it's not hopefully necessary to always engage cognitively with the subject matter, because the artworks themselves should evoke the feelings that come from that kind of understanding. But I also share a lot of my research methods. So when I'm working on a project, I try as much as possible to share the research methods, including, so a lot of my work centers around sound as a key way of engaging with the topic. So I do workshops with people where we learn to make DIY hydrophones, or I bring some of the instruments that I create. So I make instruments out of scientific equipment. I hack the scientific equipment so that it makes sound. And in so doing, I raise questions about measurement as a form of relating to the environment. And this is a very important kind of part of my work, actually, because, you know, I'm very aware that we know a lot about the problems that I'm working on already. We have a lot of scientific evidence. We have a lot of solutions, in fact, but we're not moving as fast as we need to. I mean, this is very clear. We are not moving as fast as we need to in order to address the climate crisis. We've already passed some tipping points. And so the kind of key thing for me is to understand, as I say, how we need to know this stuff before we actually do move on things. And one of the ways in which I try to engage with that in my work is by using these measuring technologies, things that measure things like acidity or carbon dioxide or conductivity of water. And taking those measurement devices and subverting them through hacking so that you hear the process of the measurement itself and understand from that both the process of measurement and more the personality of the water. So I take these instruments as well as the hydrophones and other listening devices, and in workshop environments work with people to understand this relationship to others in the environment through listening. I also share the DIY science approaches that I developed for investigating the environment. So that can be how to identify microplastics in soils, waters, fish, through to how to use a DIY spectrometer to understand what the phytophenols are in plants or foodstuffs. So I share all of these through workshops and also through online resources. At the moment, of course, it's been difficult logistically to carry out workshops, or to organise workshops has been quite logistically difficult. And so now I'm working on ways that these methods can be shared more effectively online. I set up recently a database for a project which is looking at the changing identity of the region of Lusatia, which spans the German-Polish border and is known for lignite mining, which is now being phased out. And I've been doing a sound study on this region to understand how things are changing, what the identity of the region is. And I would normally have been running workshops with people, but that's not been possible. So I've launched a crowdsourcing platform which asks people to upload sounds and that shares the experience that I would normally convey through a workshop. So understanding sort of how to listen, how to collect sounds, how to identify a sound that is pertinent to this question of like, what is your relationship with this landscape and what is the identity, what is the character of the land for you. That's shared online, and then people can upload their sounds through the interface, and I'll be publishing the database very shortly for that.
So you touched already a little bit on it in your prior explanations, but of course a big question at the moment where we have passed a point of no return in some cases is no longer how we can reverse the impact we had on the environment, but rather how we are going to coexist with it. So I know that you tackle this also in your work, and I was wondering if you can share a bit about this also with us now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the symphony that the Matter of the Soul, which is a symphony and an installation which I completed in 2018, just in time for the IPCC report coming out, was really a kind of watershed for me, because it was finally I'd managed to kind of convey this ecological grief that you know, that we were in this terrible situation. I'm working on microplastic pollution as well. Has really kind of, it's really shown to me that I want to also explore yeah, exactly how we deal with the situation that we're in now, you know, and to understand it with without necessarily judgment, understanding it as a position that we're in, and understanding that indeed it's going to impact on us as humans as much as it's impacting on the environment itself. And so, you know, with the two main projects that I've been working on recently, which is Stranger to the Trees, which looks at the coexistence of microplastics and trees and forests, and particularly urban forests. I really wanted to think about, you know, plastic not only as this pervasive pollutant, but also as a carbon sink, understanding how it interacts with these other entities, these, you know, long-term entities in the environment, to see, because it's unknown still actually what the effects of plastic pollution on trees and forests is, to try to understand how this coexistence looks and what it might mean in terms of the climate crisis. Because of course microplastic itself is a fossil fuel legacy. Almost all the plastic that we use comes from petrochemicals, and so then it's going back into the world. It's been shaped into different forms, also molecularly, and we need to understand what the implications of that are, and how it interacts with other parts of the carbon cycle. And so the aim with that project was really to go in with an open kind of question of what does coexistence look like for the trees, and also what does coexistence with plastic look like for us as well. Similarly, with This Land Is Not Mine, which is the project in Lusatia, while there was a great deal of violence done to the land, extracting the brown coal, and also done to society in extracting the coal and the disruption and destruction of villages in the region, there is now this world of opportunity in which the region and the main industries in the region can transform. And I'm very interested in how the legacy of the region, the presence of the Sorbs in the region, who are a minority group who pre-exist the national boundaries in the region, how those different components can come together towards a more sustainable future for Lusatia. So I'd say, really, I think it's very important that we accept what cannot be changed, but that we change what we can to make it better, because there is still work that we can do. Acceptance doesn't mean complete, you know, inactivity and trying to solve things. It means making the best of the things that really cannot be changed. and pulling together to work towards a better future. And it's wonderfully heartening to me that these conversations are happening, where we see so many fantastic artists working on these issues, complementing and next to the so many fantastic scientists who are also working on these issues. And to see things like the new European Bauhaus coming out, and there's a fund for aesthetics and sustainability that's being pushed for here in Germany. This is really very heartening, showing that we are moving in the right direction, because actually what needs to happen is that we need new ways of understanding these problems, connecting with them, and reframing them so that we come up with solutions that are workable for people as well. Things that can be adopted by society and accepted by society, and that therefore will be put in place by policymakers.
So for the last question that we have time to tackle, we wanted to talk a little bit about a key idea or key driver for the European platform for digital humanism and the programs that we host there, which is the idea that artists and art can have the potential to act as catalysts, and in working with audiences and the general public might be able to actually affect a change in mindset. And a challenge that kind of goes along with that, especially with artistic projects that tackle our human impact, society's impact on the environment, is that the circumstances, of course, can be quite bleak, or the scenarios that are being explored. So how do you navigate this in your own practice, especially considering that audience participation is kind of essential to how you work?
I'm really sorry, Christina, you broke up at the end.
Sorry. So I'll just repeat what I said at the end. Basically, the question was kind of the topics that you tackle sometimes can be quite bleak, or tackle scenarios that can be quite bleak. And the question was how you navigate this, especially as you work a lot with audiences in a participatory way. So I hope it was now clear.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, you know, that's an interesting question. It's quite difficult because, you know, when the first time a person sort of sees that there's microplastic in their local river or inside the fish that they might eat, the impact can be really quite great. I suppose the thing that really I share with people in these experiences, the things that keep me going, which is that there are a lot of people working towards solving these problems, and everybody can play their part in doing so. And I think the main thing is that, in my opinion, the only way that things are going to get better is if this is a systemic problem. The problems that we're talking about at the moment are all systemic problems, and they're very, very complex. They need changes at multiple points in order for there to be a shift towards something that is sustainable, something that works. And that's why we have the SDGs. The SDGs actually identify all of the points at which change needs to happen in order for us to get to a sustainable world that is fair and just. And fortunately, there are a lot of wonderful people working on these problems and finding solutions. And the more that people engage with and focus on these as problems that are very real and very pertinent to everybody's lives, then the more likely we are to succeed. And when I'm dealing with these kind of issues of shock or ecological grief in a participatory environment, I share the fact that we see more and more that things are changing and that we can take heart from that and take strength from that so that we can move forward together.
So I want to give a really big thank you for joining us here today. It was really fantastically insightful to hear about your practice and also how you work with these huge challenges that we are facing together globally. So thank you very much for joining us today, Kat. And do follow along also with the Studiotopia project to see what Kat, the scientists and the other artists are up to there.
Yeah, thanks also so much from my side to Kat. It was really fantastic to have her in the round today and also to get all these amazing ideas. She mentioned that the tipping point for some actions may be already passed. I am convinced that not for all, so we really need to start working and addressing all these issues, and that's exactly why we're here. This new series, this user manual for digital humanists, has the purpose of really addressing all these challenges and also discussing together with you what the solutions can be. We will not provide you with ready-made answers, but we are also, over the course of the next month and up until the festival, actually collect your ideas. So share them with us. Please use also any chat functionalities on the social media channels, or just write us directly in case you want to work on specific ideas or proposals. That was already the second edition, and we're coming now also to an end, leaving me actually to ask what's next.
So next up in May, we are actually going to focus on our European projects that tackle all kinds of challenges in education. So we will explore how artistic and creative approaches to teaching can generate a deeper understanding of the implications of technology, both in traditional forms and traditional formal education, as well as in informal learning environments such as the Ars Electronica Center and the Ars Electronica Labs, where we are at the moment. You can follow along with what's happening on the European Platform for Digital Humanism on Twitter, as well as on the Ars Electronica blog. And we look forward very much to seeing you next month for the third chapter in the user manual for digital humanists.